Good morning, Saints. Welcome to this week's Health Talk. We are discussing a very important subject this week. Important because it touches the lives of honest souls, and these are children. Children are a gift from God, and as parents, we have a responsibility to make sure that we guide them in ways that please God. So we need to make sure they grow up being children who know God, not fear God, but know God. Now, as well as that, we have a responsibility as adults or parents to give these children a good start. Now, a good start is important for children because if they are given such a good start and a combination of knowing God, they are more likely to be productive citizens. People who not only contribute to the development of the communities where they live, but also to the development of the nation as such. And so we need them to give them a good start. What am I saying here? I'll talk about that in a bit. One of the ways to give children a good start is to feed them well. Good nutrition is important for children. In particular, let's talk about one important part of the breastfeeding practice, which is exclusive breastfeeding. Very important for kids, and I'm going to dwell a little bit on that later on. But let me give you a bit of background. Now, breastfeeding children is very important, but breastfeeding as a natural act itself is also a learned behavior. Even if it's natural, it's a learned behavior. The good news, though, is that virtually all mothers can breastfeed, provided they have accurate information and they have the support within their families and communities and the health system. You see these key things about support from family, support from communities. They are very key to help mothers breastfeed successfully. Now, why breastfeeding? It is so critical that breastfeeding can save up to 820,000 lives of children under 5 globally. Breastfeeding only. Now, can you imagine? I did this maths a couple of years back. It's been a while now. I don't know what the numbers would look like now. But then, because we know that breastfeeding alone can prevent up to 13% of all child deaths. 13%, 1-3. When I did the maths a couple of years back for Zimbabwe, I think this number was just about 2,000 lives that we could save from breastfeeding alone. If you combine breastfeeding and complementary feeding, we could save up to about 22% of all deaths in children. I mean, that's an awful lot of lives saved by breastfeeding alone. So, it has the single largest potential impact on child mortality of any preventive intervention. Can you imagine? Now, also, breastfed children perform better on intelligent tests and are less likely to be overweight or obese, and they are less prone to diabetes in later life. It doesn't benefit children alone. Mothers also benefit. Women who breastfeed also have a reduced risk of breast cancer as well as ovarian cancer. Now, also when children are breastfed, the risk of mortality due to diarrhea and other infections decreases. So the risk due to mortality due to diarrhea and other infections can increase in infants who are either partially breastfed or not breastfed at all. And we don't want that. And with this importance of breastfeeding as an important high-impact public health intervention, the World Health Assembly has actually set targets for countries, by the way. By 2025, countries should at least have breastfeeding, exclusive breastfeeding rates of at least 50%. Now, here, Zimbabwe has a breastfeeding culture, by the way. According to the latest survey, we are sitting at 41% rates of exclusive breastfeeding. I think we can do better than this, given the importance of breastfeeding as one of the optimal feeding practices required to give children a good start. Now, let me talk about one important practice. Children need to be breastfed. It is recommended that children be breastfed within 1 hour of life. So within that 1 hour when a child is born, the initiation should start for breastfeeding. So the mother should be with its baby within 1 hour of birth. And it is recommended that mothers exclusively breastfeed for 6 months. I'll tell you why in a minute. After that, after 6 months, breast milk does not provide all the nutrients we require for the baby to grow, and therefore we need to introduce complementary food. By the way, people say weaning foods. We want to say complementary food because weaning foods connotes that you are abruptly cutting. But we are saying complementary because the food that comes then is to complement breast milk. Breast milk is the main, complemented by other foods. These foods should be adequate, they should be safe, and the child should be properly fed. And that means mothers should, while they're giving these complementary foods, they should continue breastfeeding for up to 2 years or beyond. I want to mention this, that no gift is more precious than breastfeeding for infants. That's the best gift you can ever give a child, for the child to have a good start in life. Now, let me talk about colostrum. I said that breastfeeding should initiate within 1 hour. That between that 1 hour, the few days, that's when the mother produces the first milk, which we call colostrum. In other societies, they discard that, unfortunately. And today, if you didn't know, as a mother, a prospective mother, as a prospective father, it's important that a child, as part of giving that child a good start, should get that colostrum. It is the first milk and is the very first perfect food for the newborn. Every newborn must receive the first food first. First things first. It is ideal for infants because the breast milk composition is adequate in quantity and it contains antibodies. And so it doesn't only nourish the baby, it also protects the baby. Now, feeding water or other liquids instead of colostrum deprives the child of a good start in life. As I said, as parents, we have a responsibility to give these children a good start so that they are productive citizens in their later adult life. Now, God is the master planner. He designed things in a perfect way, by the way. Can you imagine that on day one, the size of a child's stomach is about the size of a cherry. In day two, it's about the size of a walnut. 1 week, the child's stomach is the size of an apricot. And in about a month, the child's stomach is the size of a big egg like that. So even if it trickles in little quantities during the first days, that's God's master design, because the child's stomach is still small. That's only it can take. But remember, this colostrum is concentrated in nutrients and antibodies that are required to nourish the baby. So colostrum is very important, and that is why that the mother and the child should be united within the 1 hour of birth so that the process of breastfeeding is initiated. Now, earlier on I spoke about exclusive breastfeeding. It's very important. This is an area I'm passionate about, as I interact with a lot of mothers in my career as a public health nutritionist, but also in the research that I've done in this area over years. So when we say exclusive breastfeeding, we are saying the mother should give breast milk and breast milk only to the child for the first 6 months of the child's life, not even water, except medications prescribed by a medical practitioner. Now, you often meet mothers, they say, but it's hot, the child needs water, No. Breast milk has all that the child requires to grow, even water, sufficient to see the child up to 6 months. So it is part of optimal breastfeeding. So when we say optimal breastfeeding, we are talking about the practice of exclusive breastfeeding but also to continue breastfeeding for up to 2 years and beyond if it's possible. Now, exclusive breastfeeding is a cornerstone of child survival and child health because one, it serves as the child's first immunization. So it provides protection against respiratory infections, diarrhea or diseases, and other potentially life-threatening illnesses, and also against obesity and other non-communicable diseases in later life. So exclusive breastfeeding is one of the key things we can do to give our children a good start. Now, let me talk about breastfeeding and COVID-19. I know there could be questions to say, okay, now with the COVID, what happens? Women with COVID-19 can breastfeed if they wish to do so. They should practice respiratory hygiene and wear a mask and wash hands before and after touching the baby, and they should do routine clean and disinfect surfaces. So mothers can still breastfeed even if they have suspected or they've confirmed a COVID-19 virus. I want to quote this direct to say, can COVID-19 be passed through breastfeeding? Active COVID-19 virus, a virus that causes infection, has not to date been detected in breast milk of any mother with confirmed or suspected COVID-19. It appears unlikely, therefore, that COVID-19 would be transmitted through breastfeeding or by giving breast milk that has been expressed by a mother who is confirmed or suspected to have COVID-19. So that's what we have. There's another question which I want to quote direct from the guidance given by WHO. In communities where COVID-19 is prevalent, should mothers breastfeed? The answer is yes. In all socioeconomic settings, breastfeeding improves survival and provides lifelong health and development advantages to newborns and infants. Now, so we've talked about the importance of colostrum. We've talked about exclusive breastfeeding. This is giving a child breast milk and breast milk only for 6 months. And then at 6 months, you start complementary foods, not weaning foods, as I said before, because you are complementing breast milk with other family foods. And that way, you are giving your child a good start. Now, as I go to the end of my presentation, let me talk about complementary feeding. This is what mothers do now. Complementary feeding is that period when you start giving other foods to a child at around 6 months. Now, the transition from exclusive breastfeeding, by the way, to full use of family foods is a very vulnerable period. That is where you see a lot of children becoming malnourished. So if that gear is not changed properly, we can have a crash there. So we need to have that good transition, and that is like driving. You need to change gears very well as you transition from providing only breast milk to start complementary foods. And these foods, by the way, when you start introducing them, they should be adequate in energy. In breastfeeding, it comes as a package. All these things are provided. But now you are bringing this food, which then you should take responsibility to make sure that as a parent, as a mother, as a guardian, as a father, as a grandmother, it has enough energy, it has enough protein, and it contains micronutrients, both minerals and vitamins, to meet the child's growing nutritional status. Remember, these people are at this growing spurt. By the way, they need more protein per kg body weight than adults. So you need to make sure that they're filled well so that they continue developing and they develop their full potential. And we know that children who don't develop to their full potential have certain limitations, and they're not as productive as we would want them to be in later life as adults. Another key thing about complementary foods is that they should be safe. We have to minimize contamination. Hygiene is very important when we are preparing foods for kids, because if contamination occurs, that's when we start having diarrhea and so on and so forth, and we don't want that. Another key thing about feeding children, it requires active care. It requires stimulation, because you have to to encourage them to eat. Now, it's not easy. I'm saying this from experience as a parent myself, who at one point was the main caregiver for my daughter. It's not easy. If she was one of the she was a fussy eater. So we needed to negotiate and, stimulate and so on. I know it's not easy, but it can be done, fortunately. So we need to be active and also to stimulate the child to encourage them to eat. I'll talk about a few tips later on as I close. Now, as I said, around 6 months, an infant's needs for energy and nutrients start to exceed that which is provided by breast milk, okay? And so complementary foods are now necessary to meet that gap. So at this stage, also an infant is also developmentally ready to eat. That's why we are saying up to 6 months we need exclusive breastfeeding. Breast milk and breast milk only. But at 6 months we then need to transition and start giving complementary foods. At this age, the child is also ready to deal with that. So if complementary foods are not introduced around the age of 6 or thereabout, if they are given inappropriate, infants may falter in growth. Mothers know that children have that growth card and they use it to monitor how their child is growing in the milestones and so on. And they have those lines that they are taught how to monitor whether the child is above or low. And so that's very important because it gives you an idea of whether this feeding that I'm talking about is working. Once you miss that, then you begin to see your child falling below the line. And you don't want that to happen. Okay, let me give you a few principles for appropriate complementary feeding. For instance, number 1. Continue frequent on-demand breastfeeding until 2 years. Now, let me go back and talk about breastfeeding a little bit. Earlier on, I said it is important to support mothers to successfully breastfeed as daddies, as aunties, and others. This is because, take for instance, a textbook child would take about 10 minutes to breastfeed, but this will vary from child to child. Some may take a little bit more, some may take a little bit less, because they are all different. Now, and mothers need that time to be able to breastfeed for that much. For instance, if mothers don't have that time, I am talking about what I have spoken about in this church before, the issue of women's time poverty. If we don't support them, that's when you see mothers breastfeeding for 2 minutes this breast. The children need to stay on the breast for that much because they need the first milk, which is sometimes lighter and not as fatty as what we call the hind milk. So if the child stays longer enough on the breast, they are going to get the foremilk and the hind milk. And the hind milk is important because that's the one that has some more fat than the foremilk and provides the child with satiety value. Sometimes mothers tell me that I don't produce enough breast milk and my child is crying. It's because sometimes we don't get that far. We just breastfeed and give the child foremilk and change the breast and go to this one before you even get to the hind milk. It's very important that mothers have time to do this. It's a full-time job. It needs others to support them. And one other thing that is important to give these children a good start is to be able to do what we call proper positioning and attachment. Now, I said earlier on that breastfeeding, natural as it is, it doesn't come very obvious, particularly for young mothers, first-time mothers. Those who are old enough and us who are in the health profession know that mothers always come and say, it's not happening, I'm feeling the pain on the breast. Mostly these are issues around positioning and attachment. If the child is not attached very well, it's just like on the nipple, not attached on the areola. That causes what I call inefficient breastfeeding. So the milk doesn't come that much and the child gets frustrated and starts crying because they are hungry and things are not happening. It's important that you have good positioning and good attachment so that breastfeeding is efficient. That way the child would be satisfied. Every mother has enough milk. By the way, let me say this. The physiology of breast is such that is based on the supply and demand like in economics. The more you breastfeed, the more milk comes. So if you don't breastfeed as frequent as and as often, emptying the breast, nothing comes. So the whole idea for you to make sure your baby gets enough to breastfeed as efficient, empty the breast. One of the reasons mothers get what we call engorgement when the breast swells like that is because it's not emptied very well, either because of poor emptying due to poor attachment and poor positioning. And then you get that pain. The best way to deal with that is to empty that breast. Another thing that mothers complain about are the sore nips or cracked nips. It becomes very painful. It's also because most likely there's poor attachment to the breast causing those nipples to crack and become very painful. If you have these problems, please visit your nearest health facility. They will help you or give you reference to a lactation consultant or a lactation counselor who will help you to deal with those problems. Otherwise, all mothers should be able to breastfeed efficiently. Now, all this time I said the child needs, a textbook child needs 10 minutes, a lot of time, and we are saying the mother should breastfeed on demand. So she would do that a lot of times during the day. And mothers tell me that some people say you are lazy every other time you're sitting down breastfeeding, you're sitting down breastfeeding. They should do that because they should breastfeed on demand. Let me give a tip to mothers. When you breastfeed a child when he's already crying, that's way too late. You have let it too late down the line. There should be other cues that tell you your child needs to breastfeed, and crying should be the last resort. That's where people should support. If mother gets to breastfeed when the child is crying, that's way down the road. It's the last sign that the child shows that they want to eat. So it's important that we have this and we support mothers, dads, and others so that mothers do this and they do it effectively so that it's beneficial to the children. Now, let me go back about my last comments on the guidelines for complementary feeding. I've spoken about continue frequent on demand until 2 years. Practice responsive feeding. Feed slowly and patiently. I've said this, I used to do with my daughter and set goalposts and say, okay, now let's go for 3 spoons. If you are saying 3, please don't change goalposts, because next time you want to negotiate the child's, they are very clever, these people, they are very smart as well. So don't change goalposts. If you say now, let's have 3, and if they have 3, stop there for that particular feed until the next one, so that there is trust and you are not seen like somebody who is changing goalposts. So you are negotiating the feeding. Sometimes they want to stop now, but you need them to push a little bit further, and you say 3 spoons. When you say 3, let it be 3, so that when next time you want to negotiate, you don't have challenges. So encourage them to eat, but do not force them to eat. Talk to the children and maintain a contact eye with them. It's very important. Practice good hygiene and proper food handling. So you start at 6 months with small amounts of food and increase gradually as the child gets older. I think mothers know that. And gradually increase the food consistency and also introduce variety as you go down the line. So increase the number of times that the child is fed, 2 to 3 times per day for infants 6 to 8 months of age, and 3 to 4 times for those who are 9 to 23 months of age, and 1 to 2 additional snacks as required. Now, there is also a challenge of feeding children during illness, but what we should do is that during illness, please increase fluid intake and include more breastfeeding. So negotiate to breastfeed more and include more fluids. So in summary, I think this is what I thought I could share with you in terms of giving these children a good start. And one of the ways of doing it is to provide them with good nutrition. And it starts with make sure that they get the colostrum they need. You exclusively breastfeed for 6 months. At 6 months, you start introducing complementary food, not weaning foods. And then continue to breastfeed for at least 2 months or more. That way, we would have children as who fear God, but also who have given a good start. And that way, they are more likely to be productive citizens in future. I hope this was fruitful. And it gives some tips for mothers. This is not for mothers, it's for everyone, mothers, dads, aunties, and everybody. We should support those who are breastfeeding and feeding children so that together we contribute in giving these children a good start. For those who are breastfeeding, Happy breastfeeding, and this is where we end today. Have a good one.